In 1960, the Aral Sea was the world's fourth largest lake. By 2000, it had vanished, replaced by a poisoned desert of salt and chemicals. 40 years. One environmental catastrophe. This is how an entire sea disappeared. In 1960, the Aral Sea was the fourth largest lake on Earth. It covered 26,400 square miles, larger than Lake Michigan. Two rivers fed it, the Amu Darya and the Sirdarya, flowing down from the mountains of Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan through Central Asia's driest region. For centuries, these waters sustained an unlikely civilization. The Soviet Union inherited this balance in 1922. For 40 years, Moscow left it alone. Fishing towns ringed the Aral shores, Aralsk, Tastubek, Minak. In 1960, the sea produced 45,000 tons of fish annually. The catch fed families across Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Canning factories hummed. The ports were alive. The water itself was cool, brackish, about 1/10 the salinity of ocean water. Sturgeon spawned in the river deltas. Reeds grew thick along the margins. In summer, the surface reached 68 degrees Fahrenheit. People swam. Children played on beaches of fine sand. It was, by any measure, a functioning ecosystem and a functioning economy. But Moscow saw something different in the Aral's rivers: cotton. Central Asia's soil was fertile. The climate was hot and dry, perfect for irrigation. In 1960, the Soviet leadership made a decision that would ripple for generations. They would divert the Amu Darya and Sirdarya to grow cotton in the deserts. They called it progress. They called it necessary. What they didn't calculate was what the rivers would stop feeding. By 1970, Soviet planners had made a choice that nobody could undo. The Aral Sea was still the world's fourth largest inland body of water, but not for long. Moscow had decided to transform Central Asia into a cotton superpower. The Amu Darya and Sirdarya rivers, which fed the sea for millennia, would be diverted instead. Two massive canal systems were under construction: the Karakum Canal, begun in 1956, and the smaller but critical Northern Aral Canal. Water that once flowed to Aral would irrigate the deserts of Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. Cotton production targets tripled between 1960 and 1975. Nobody in Moscow asked the fishermen of Aralsk what they thought. By the early 1970s, Soviet hydrologists began noticing something troubling in their data. The sea's water level was dropping. Not gradually, measurably, year after year. A scientist named Alexei Asarin warned his supervisors at the Institute of Hydrometeorology in 1974 that the Aral was dying. The warnings were filed away, ignored. Moscow's 5-year plans did not account for ecosystem collapse. The cotton quotas were non-negotiable. In Aralsk, the fishing fleet still operated as if nothing had changed, but the captains could feel it. The water was getting shallower. The catches were getting smaller. And there was something else they didn't understand yet. The salt concentration in the sea was beginning to rise in ways that would soon make the water itself toxic to the fish. By 1960, the Aral Sea had already begun to shrink. The diversions were working exactly as planned, too well. Water that had flowed into the sea for millennia now ran instead through the cotton fields of Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. Year after year, the level dropped. By 1970, it had fallen 23 feet. The fishing fleet watched the shoreline retreat like a slow-motion catastrophe, predictable and unstoppable. The 1980s accelerated everything. Between 1980 and 1987 alone, the sea lost half its remaining volume. Towns like Aralsk, once thriving ports with bustling markets, found themselves stranded on dry land, their harbors now salt flats stretching to the horizon. The salinity spiked from 10 grams per liter in 1960 to 30 grams per liter by the mid-1980s. Sturgeon and pike, the species that had sustained the region for generations, began to vanish. The fishery collapsed entirely by 1987. What had been a $40 million annual industry simply ceased to exist. By 1989, the Aral Sea had split into two separate bodies of water, the North Aral and the South Aral. The surface area had shrunk from 254 square miles to less than 13,000. The water itself was becoming poison, but the transformation into something far worse, into a dust factory that would poison an entire region, was only just beginning. By 1987, the Aral Sea had fractured into two separate bodies of water. The northern Aral, fed by the Sirdaria River, would eventually stabilize, but the southern Aral, once home to 60,000 fishermen, was dying fast. In the port city of Minac, Uzbekistan, fishing boats sat abandoned in sand 160 kilometers from water. The catch that had fed Moscow and Kiev vanished. So did the jobs. So did hope. The local economy collapsed in months, not years. Fish canneries shut down. Markets closed. By 1992, the fishing fleet was gone entirely. But the people remained, trapped in a place that no longer existed as they knew it. Dr. Ataibkov, a physician in the region, began documenting what he saw: respiratory illnesses, kidney disease, throat cancers. Birth defects rose sharply. No one could prove direct causation then. The data was chaotic. The Soviet Union itself was dissolving. Moscow offered explanations, then silence. Planners blamed drought. They blamed inefficient irrigation. They blamed everyone except themselves. By 1995, international scientists arrived to study what had happened. What they found in the exposed seabed shocked them. Salt deposits mixed with pesticide residue and industrial toxins. The wind picked it up. The dust storms carried it across Central Asia. But there was one detail the early reports almost missed, something about the dust's composition that would, decades later, reveal an even darker truth. The dust still rises from the Aral Basin. In 2019, NASA satellites recorded massive salt storms sweeping across Central Asia, some reaching the Himalayas, 3,000 kilometers away. Researchers drilling into the seabed found layers of pesticide residue, DDT, and radioactive particles from weapons testing. The former fishing ports of Aralsk and Minac are now 100 kilometers inland, surrounded by ship graveyards rusting in air so dry it cracks the earth. What was learned? That the sea's collapse was not inevitable, it was a choice. Between 1960 and 2000, Soviet planners diverted 99% of the Amu Daria and Sirdaria rivers to irrigate cotton fields. They knew. Internal documents from 1964 warned the Aral would vanish. But cotton quotas mattered more. Today, Kazakhstan's partial recovery of the North Aral through a 1999 dam has proven one thing: water can return. Fish populations have rebounded. The South Aral, however, remains mostly lost. And the open question that haunts hydrologists concerns what lies beneath the recovered North Aral's surface, whether the toxic sediments stirred up during 40 years of desiccation can ever truly settle. The Aral Sea's collapse stands as humanity's starkest warning about unchecked ambition and environmental consequence. Another file is already open, the story of how one nation's thirst for cotton reshaped an entire region's fate. Subscribe to the archive to uncover more forgotten catastrophes.